This video is about our blog and research on heirloom seeds, and it was originally written by my husband, Dave, and improved on upon the years as we learned more and more. So why do we choose heirloom seeds, and what exactly are heirloom seeds? One of the most important goals in sustainable gardening is saving seeds from some of our valued plants and using them to grow the next cycle of plants the following year. Humanity has observed this cycle in nature for countless generations and learned to harvest and save seeds from the most useful plants that we encounter. Seeds of favored varieties were treasured and stored carefully and passed as heirlooms from mother to daughter and father to son. Heirloom seeds represent not only the blueprints and potential to produce interesting plants, but also, through careful record keeping, store the history of the people and cultures who preserved and cultivated it. So, what is an heirloom seed? I don't know if this blog actually has some of the. Okay, so the one, I think it glosses over some of the anecdotes that we have encountered over the past, and I'm gonna insert these here after I record. But one of them is how in African cultures, especially the slaves that were imported from and enslaved from the African islands and African countries and brought here to the States, for instance, would hide the seeds in the braid of their hair. And I think this was highlighted even more recently in books about this, as we come to know the more about the history of the African diaspora. And in fact, that's how a lot of our collards seeds, as we were going into why heirloom seeds, one of the first seeds that we started keeping and trying to steward were heirloom collard seeds. Because at that time, maybe 20 years ago, the seeds for heirloom for collards were disappearing. And they had a seed bank, and there were two gentlemen from the seed bank, I think of the USDA, that approached one of a southern gardener named Ira Wallace, and she is in our part of the world like a very revered food ways advocate and seed steward, specifically of collard seeds. Now that there are, and because of her, there are so many varieties of heirloom collards that have survived and have been cataloged and have been trialed. And thanks to the help of so many people, like in the top of my head, that I can bring together, that I'm honored to know have been part of this movement. So that and that's one of those one of those seeds that were kept in the hair of the African slaves, sadly, that came to this country and brought about these collards. So whenever you eat collards, it's more meaningful when you know, especially that these are from seeds that have a history, and are also the most nutritious ingredients, one of like a superfood. So many things to say about collards. But that's just one of several heirloom varieties. In in just American history too, it was not uncommon for, on her wedding night, for a mother to pass on the seeds of that they had been growing in their backyard to her daughter, and in this way, it is always very moving for me to relate, to retell this. In this way, it was as if the mother was saying, now you're on your own. Now here are the seeds. You can go anywhere with a little piece of me and with this sustenance to be able to feed yourself and your family with these seeds that come from your legacy, from your heritage, from me. And so those are just two of several stories. I'm not even going to the Native Americans, heirloom seed varieties. And the other thing to note about these heirloom seed varieties that makes them special, this is one this is one like paragraph that packs so much that I need to extend this paragraph for sure. Another thing that makes heirloom seeds special is that they are also more resilient, and we overlook this nowadays. I mean, there have been whole documentaries I watched one documentary on trying to hybridize or make improve like the quality of a seed with genetic modification and all these things. But these have already naturally been bred through thousands, hundreds of years, to become more resilient, to become more drought tolerant, to become more pest uh, resilient. And and then what happened was, as you'll see later on, I hope in this blog, is oh, it is not in here. No. Okay. What happened is that the seed the seed companies that arose had selected specific varieties of seed that kind of made the varieties less and lessen the diversity of these heirloom seeds. Oh, okay. I think we talk about this in a different blog. That's why it's not here, which isn't a biodiversity blog. Okay, and here we have it. So and now where, for instance, we had 338 musk melon varieties in 1903, we are down to 27. Or, for instance, very cucumber varieties, 285. Can you think that we have possibly lost cucumber varieties that are, more resistant to the powdery mildews that we are battling nowadays? And we find ourselves trying to mimic or somehow GMO nature by cultivating this, in a unnatural way, when these have already been bred for us. But what we've done is we've lost it and not grown heirloom varieties, and instead stuck to the 16 that were in the catalogs that we bought. Now, that's not to say we cannot. I myself, I have a whole box here of seeds from an heirloom seed company that takes care of stewarding the seeds and trying to pass on this heritage legacy of heirloom seeds. Baker's Creek is one. I just want to shout out to them. Several Seed Savers Exchange, Restoration Seeds, Ira Wallace's own Southern Seed Exchange. So these seed companies have intentionally tried to find growers to grow out and continue to grow out these heirloom varieties when, maybe the average farmer gardener cannot. So I try to grow out one set of collards, for instance, but I can't do that for all my seeds, and I don't have the space to do that for all my seeds. Flax, for instance, I'm trying to steward a specific kind of flax. And there are certain beans that we can't get, for instance, fava beans. And so we're trying to steward those. There are only like 2 or 3 or 4 varieties in the market of fava beans. And it's very hard. We have to import ours from Canada and get heirloom fava bean seeds from there. So that is all to say the importance of that specific and the heritage that heirloom seeds bring. There's so many layers to that. Okay, now what is an heirloom seed? If we're talking about heirloom seed, we probably should have started with what is an heirloom seed. And it can be confusing to shop for seeds we see in the stores: non-GMO, organic, heirloom, what do the open pollinated, what do these all mean? So we want to categorize by how the parent plants are propagated. Open pollinated seed, when you see OP on the seed packet, seeds are seeds that are isolated from other varieties and will produce children seeds that are very close to the parent in terms of properties. Usually, a seed that is open pollinated has been stable for at least 7 generations of seeds, 7 years. Let's say it's an annual, to be considered an open pollinated variety. Heirloom seeds are open pollinated varieties that have an extensive history detailing how they were saved and originally bred. And sometimes the history is lost, and all you have is the name Amish paste or Uncle Harry's something beans, or a mortgage lifter. Are those interesting names for seeds, right? Opposite that are hybrid varieties. So the opposing camp of seeds are hybrid varieties like Big Boy that won't produce seeds that are true to type. Now, it's not necessarily bad to grow them. It's just you don't expect them to produce seed for you that you can grow again. And therefore, that makes you dependent on that system, on the store that sold you the seed. So children will likely be different from the parent. Hybrid plants don't produce seeds that are worth saving because they're likely to have unstable properties. Hybrids are grown for the disease resistance and vigor, but in order to produce a consistent supply of hybrid seeds, the seed provider will need to have stocks of the parent plants to produce the hybrids. You may have seen seeds labeled F1 or F2 hybrid and wonder what that meant. So this refers to filial generation from the stable parent plant. So F, filial, like son, from the Latin, means that the hybrid 2 is 2. F2 means that the hybrid is 2 generations removed from the stable plant that were used to crossbreed it. A link shows more if you want to go in depth, nerd out on this. So hybrids differ from genetically engineered seeds, GM, since they're usually produced using traditional crossbreeding instead of gene editing techniques. And GM is where you would take a gene even from something that's not a plant, like a different animal even, and put that in the plant for whatever reason. And so that, I think, is the most unnatural way to do it, most expensive way, and the most cost everything. You'd use so much more fossil fuel and such to do something that nature can do really free, cheap, easy for you. So now, when the European colonists landed on the shores of Eastern America all the way up to the middle of the 19th century, the diets of most Americans were focused on subsistence instead of the wide variety of fruits and vegetables that we take for granted today. It was at this point, with a large influx of new immigrants, new agricultural technology, and an oversupply of basic foodstuffs like corn and wheat, that America started diversifying their diets beyond subsistence. A really fascinating book about this time period is called Food Explorer, which delves into the biography of David Fairchild, a botanist who was responsible for introducing America to avocados, dates, quinoa, and kale, and many other foods that he and his fellow colleagues at the Department of Plant Introduction found in their travels around the world. This was the golden age of seed catalogs, with gardeners around America inspired by the potential of growing all kinds of interesting flowers and vegetables from all around the world. This is Dave, my husband. Even as a kid in the 80s, I remember drooling over a burpee catalog and imagining the amazing things I could grow from the fanciful descriptions. The difference between the late 19th century and today is the huge drop in diversity in plant varieties that we grow. There has been an over 90% drop in the number of seed varieties that are still available on the market compared to the end of the 19th century. In our modern monoculture agricultural system, most farmers plant the same top plant varieties. The problem occurs when a new bacteria, fungus, or virus targets a trait in those top performing varieties that quickly decimates the global supply of production of that plant. So the best way to combat this inherent weakness in our modern agriculture system is to save seeds from a diverse background. Food Arc. So this is a different website. A crisis is looming to feed our growing population. So in National Geographic magazine, and it talks about how they save the seeds in a food arc. So check that one out by Charles Siebert. So with that in mind, the call to action, the invitation for you from learning about heirloom seeds is to try saving your own seed, even if it's just one this year. I feel the best reason for learning and cultivating heirloom seeds goes back to the meaning of the word heirloom, which means something valuable, passed down from earlier generations. Heirloom seeds are valuable items cultivated by our parents and grandparents, increasingly our great and great great grandparents, and the stories of how they were kept and preserved are deeply compelling. In 1975, Ken and Diane Ott-Wheely started a seed exchange using a tomato and a Morning Glory variety brought to America by Diane's Bavarian immigrant great-grandparents. Building on the initial mission to save seeds with interesting cultural history that they found were becoming unavailable in seed catalogs, This exchange has grown into Seed Savers Exchange, a national nonprofit with 13,000 members. It maintains one of the largest seed banks in America with over 20,000 variety of seeds. An 850-acre farm in Iowa, which we had visited, our family have visited, has deposited over 3,000 varieties in the Svalbard Global Seed Vault in Norway. About 20% of these varieties have stories recalling where the seed came from and why it was observed. Many of these seeds are not tastier or significantly more productive than commercial varieties, but they are usually grown because they had a unique trait that differentiated them and prompted their preservation. Quite often, I find the story about varieties more interesting than the horticultural potential of the seed, with many of the stories painting a picture of the various ethnic groups that immigrated to different parts of America. Again, one of the things that brought me to Seed Savers was one of their seeds production directors, Tor Jansen, was from an area in Iowa that was close to the Native American reserve of the fox and, oh my goodness, I can't remember, sock and fox tribe, and they were a tribe that knew, or yeah, people that knew also that their language was intermingled with um, Old German because of the settlements of Mennonites, or yes, that were in that area as well, and how he had in his work, done a lot of research and interviewed them, and got so many stories from how, just stories that were not, from the seeds during World War, and just the interactions between Native American peoples and immigrants from Europe at that time. And I think that was one of the points where I was like, yes, sign me up. I want to steward these seeds. I want to grow a seed that just has a whole bunch of history rather than nothing. It's like just an item. It really is a beautiful thing to learn what the history of these seeds have been. So more on that. Finally, moving towards a diverse future. Although it's important to preserve our seed heritage and reclaim seed varieties that are on the brink of extinction, the best hope for our seed future is continuing the work of plant breeding, which involves stabilizing hybrid varieties that show promise and creatively breeding plants to produce new open pollinated varieties. So, I mean, here in this part, Dave looks at marrying or merging the science of hybridizing varieties and the age-old techniques of stabilizing them by growing them out so that they are stable for 7 generations, and and seeing what traits we can bring back, and what traits and how can what traits such as resilience and drought resilience and pest resistance we can bring back from each of these seeds. Unfortunately, overzealous plant protection legislation serving the interest of large corporations has turned the commercial seed business into big business. As these corporations have become more involved in plant breeding, they recruit the best talent from universities and direct their research into producing plant varieties that improve the bottom line of the corporation. Almost always, these desired plant properties do not include taste or, more importantly, viability in small backyard gardens. The fallout from this is that we as gardeners have less seed varieties to choose from because there are less plant breeders doing their work. There is an open source seed initiative called, yes, that started in 2014 to reclaim seed varieties for experimentation by plant breeders and farmers. And that way we can protect them and nobody can patent a specific seed and sue farmers for growing them, sometimes unknowingly. It borrows heavily from the successful open source movement in the software industry, where the results of seed experimentation are freely offered to the public domain as long as nobody ever tries to patent or restrict usage in the future. Here's a list of plant breeders with some short bios agreeing to be a part of this initiative. A surprisingly large number of them are formally trained biologists who buck the current agriculture academic environment, which is dominated by private investment in public research, to contribute to the public good through their plant breeding work. We know a few of them, and it's very inspiring, honestly, to see how they have been able to walk away from big companies, even Monsanto, and started their own initiatives really in a scary way of doing plant breeding work, putting their science to use, doing seed trial work, as in the case of Nico Angerbert in seedlinked.org. Just a whole bunch of good people trying to do good and continue and use their talents for plant breeding instead of keeping this to the few monopolies of seed companies that are out there. Aside from annual plant breeder work, there are also researchers that are interested in restoring historical landrace varieties of wheat, rice, and other cereal grains that were historically grown in local communities during the 19th century. So the work is interesting because they turn traditional agricultural concepts on their head, such as dry land rice and perennial wheat varieties. In addition, some of these older varieties of wheat, like einkorn and emmer, are better tolerated by people suffering gluten sensitivities since they haven't been over-selected like much of modern wheat varieties. So in a lot of our research, we found that the wheat varieties that we currently have are what are often the causes of the diseases that we suffer. And we're not quite sure what, you'd have to go into the research a little bit more deeply. But the landrace researchers, what does landrace mean? It means, like, I believe it means growing something in the place that it's situated for, and stewarding the seed to that place, so that it gets acclimated to um, to the to the climate that it currently is in, the context that it currently lives in. And so that seed, I'm thinking of Julia. Oh my goodness! Now, well, click this link and you'll find out. Um, they have seen that the nutrient density, specifically in these landrace varieties, is much higher than in just buying an organic seed from a catalog and starting it. When you start your seed from a seed that you collected, the nutrient density is much higher, and that's where they're also trying to um, promote that practice of seed saving, specifically for wheat, for grains, which is the bulk of our food, of the American diet, because that's what would affect us more nutritionally. Okay, so I hope that I've been clear with that, and I hope that I'm representing Dave. It's funny because he had written this a few years back, and since then there's much more research really that has come about on landrace varieties, on heirloom seeds, and stewarding them. It's really exciting work, and to be a part of that and witness that from seeing a variety that's dying to become a variety that you can now purchase if you wanted to, because people have grown them out, is just wonderful. It's just a really heartwarming feeling. So the choice is yours. I recommend that when you are planning out your seed purchases, you not only consider the types of plants you want to grow, but also the traits in those plants that are important to you. If taste is important, or is taste important, or have you had a lot of trouble growing a desired crop and it's more important that you get some disease resistance? Are you growing your crops to maximize your health or improve your nutrition? You might want to consider different colors of your favorite veggies to grow, since they might have more anthocyanins or lycopenes. So that's in the case of tomatoes, lycopenes, and anthocyanins are in the case of your leafy greens. So whenever you grow a leafy green that's more purple, that has a higher content of anthocyanins, if that's something that's important to your diet. And by the way, in the case of collards, it's also been shown that the bluer ones instead of the greener ones are also more pest tolerant. So with that, we leave it to you. We hope that this has been inspiring for you to grow your own heirloom seeds. And if you're watching this on YouTube, click the link below to see the rest of the blog that connects this to the resources that can get you growing your own seeds. And if you're interested in learning more about seed saving, there are a bunch of resources that I want to put down here, where to source what the reputable seed companies are that have these heirloom varieties available. And yeah, hope that you can tell us more about your seeds by emailing us at permaculturegardens@gmail.com. Thanks.